Francisco Franco, one of the most violent and longest-lasting dictators of the 20th century. Franco has been compared to Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Hitler, and Mussolini. Although he was not as famous as them, he did just as terrible things. Franco's ultimate goal was to unify Spain. He did not succeed. Young Franco led the revolution that caused the Spanish Civil War, and in 1939 he won. He then tried for almost 40 years to unify Spain with fascist methods, and he failed. Franco grew up in a household where all the men went to a military academy for training when they were 18. He was the youngest general since Napoleon. Before the Civil War, Spain was unstable. Franco caused the uprising that led to the Civil War because he and many other people were unhappy with the weak government. One example of this was when the government didn't stop the anti-Catholic extremists from burning Catholic churches. This made Franco incredibly angry because he was a staunch Catholic. At first, he was reluctant to revolt, but then he became leader and used terror and violence to win the Spanish Civil War. During the war, Franco's forces shot women and killed other people in much worse ways, like strangling, decapitating, and torturing. Franco thought that Hitler and Mussolini had the right idea on how to rule and control people. They both used fascist methods to control people by force. For example, Nazism is considered a type of fascism. Franco used similar methods to force people to live in a way he thought was right. Franco also let Hitler try out his new weapons, bombs, on Spanish people. Picasso's painting Guernica is about one bombing in which hundreds of innocent people died. Fascist leaders believe that the strength and power of their country is more important than the happiness and well-being of its people. After the war, Franco continued to use fascist tactics of terror and violence to brutally control Spain. He took away women's rights and frowned upon learning. He tried to unify Spain with fascist methods. He wanted everyone to be Catholic, for everyone to speak Spanish, for all are to be the same, and for everyone to have the same values. This made many people livid because they had different religions. People who spoke another language were infuriated about having to learn a tongue with which they were unfamiliar. By telling them to change their language and religion, he was almost telling them to change themselves completely.
He was trying to construct a unified national identity by controlling the language that people speak.
Franco discriminated against anyone who opposed him, and he was anti-intellectual. Franco passed harsh laws, especially against adultery and divorce, that were aimed at limiting women's rights and freedom. In Spain, until 1975, a woman needed her husband's permission to work, buy property, or even travel, could aspire to marriage and motherhood, but little more, and was legally obliged to obey her husband.
He had a very bad track record on human rights in general, so anyone who was marginalized in any way would have suffered that much more. For example, homosexuals were very targeted and women were just sidelined. The people who were truly targeted the most were his political opponents, anyone who opposed the fascist regime.
Franco died in 1975 and left a legacy of lingering anger, mistrust, and fear.
The healing process has been slow, which is not surprising for a country that had a dictator for 40 years, and a dictator that really halted a lot of progress. There were a lot of things going on in Spain that were very stilted during Franco's time, especially given that Spain was at one time a great Western power.
First, there was cleaning up to do. Buildings had to be finished and renovated. For example, Sagrada Familia had stopped building during his reign due to lack of interest and money. This is one reason why Sagrada Familia isn't finished today. Other buildings were also compromised. The Palo de la Música Catalana was covered up during Franco's years because it represented Catalonia and not the rest of Spain. Now it has been renovated and shown in full again. Catalonia, an autonomous region in the northeast, voted to separate from Spain in the past year.
Well, language is so important to a person's identity that even if they're not allowed to speak a language in public, they can't go to a restaurant and speak in their native language, they can't talk to their mother while they're walking down the street. People try to preserve those languages in home, in the secrecy of their own home.
Spain needed to regroup to get back in order, but memories remain. There are still protesters there to this day, protesting against Francoism. This footage is from Madrid in October 2014. Survivors of Franco's victims gather weekly to call for a minute of silence and to warn others that it is dangerous to forget what he did. They are holding a banner that says, "Against impunity, solidarity with the victims of the Franquismo." They are saying, we can never expect that because the tyranny ended, it won't be back at some point. After every dark night, there will be a bright sunrise where people will raise their justice and liberty flags and no one will be able to stop them. Now as every week passes, let's please make a minute of complete silence in honor to all the people affected, to all the people tortured, to all the people that were in jail because of the tyranny of Franco's regime. Please, let's do a minute of silence. Franco did the opposite of his goal to unify Spain. He divided Spain and many people in it. Franco led an uprising that caused the civil war in Spain. Then he took control of Spain using a fascist approach. He failed in his attempts to unify Spain. Franco had an understandable goal, but he went about accomplishing his goal in the wrong way and was too extreme. He ended up dividing Spain more than unifying it.